It is definitely a great privilege to be standing in front of you all, amazing human beings, awesome human beings with great value, with great vision. You may see yourself to be young, but you have no idea the plans that God has for your life. The theme for this conference was raising a generation of faithful leaders, because I believe that being faithful and then being truthful is one of the hardest value we can ever exhibit or show to others. We live in a world that is consumed with lies, and so to be somebody who wants to be faithful and then speak the truth, it takes a different level of character. It takes a bold vision. Now you have to understand that, yes, the main theme that cuts across, because it's all about leadership. But today, I just don't want to talk about leadership. I want to tell you a story. Who would like to hear the story? Well, let me see if you want to hear the story. I'm going to tell you a story. But the question is, what is the story about? What is the story about? A story, one of divine connection. A story of obedience. A story of consistency. And a story of God taking something small and then turning it into something impactful. That is a story I'm here to tell you. The next question is, why am I telling you this story? Because Rewire Leadership Academy didn't start with a conference like this. It didn't start with a large audience like this. Then the question is, then what did it start with? I'm sure you are wondering. Maybe it might not be what you think. But from my journey, well, the first thing I'm going to say might differ from everybody. But the next two, I believe, can be constant for all of us. The story for me, one, began with a Bible app. It began with a Bible app. Maybe yours will not begin with a Bible app. It might be something different. Maybe it can also happen just like it happened for me. That was the first thing. The next thing was a message. It began with a message. It began with a message. And the last thing, it began with a willing heart. With a willing heart. The willingness to do, the willingness to act. Now, somebody also asks again, then how did it all begin? Because everything has a starting point. Everything has a starting point. And by the time that I'm done with this story, and I want you to follow the story very well, because there are so many key things you learn. Don't allow anything else to distract you, because maybe through this, you might get the message that God might use to transform your life forever. Here we go. On September 16th, 2018, that very day was a Sunday. It was a Sunday. And then, let me make this confession. I didn't go to church. On that Sunday, I didn't go to church. But to my defense, I was spending time at home on a Bible app, as I do almost every day. So on that faithful day, 16 September 2018, my dear friend and my sister in Christ here sent me a simple message through, Facebook. We all know Facebook Messenger. And her message was simple. She was just thanking me for liking her Bible verses on the Bible app, because we all used to be on the Bible app. At that time, I had no idea who she was. I had no idea who she was. But I had this habit of every day opening my Bible app, reading a verse of the day, meditating, maybe doing a Bible plan. And then I'll take time to also read through other people on the verses that they've shared. I just like them as I read through it. I had no idea she was one of those people that I constantly was liking her Bible verse. I had no idea. And so that act on my behalf, I believe, got her curious. Who is this guy, whoever he might be, liking my Bible verses and every day? And so I think she used a link of my Facebook profile on the Bible app and then checked me out on Facebook. Back then, I was also teaching here in this school. And then she was also a teacher. So I believe that by seeing some of the pictures and then maybe the school and then student, that became more of like a common ground. We had something in common because we all teachers. So then she reached out. So what I thought was just a daily habit. Daily habits. As believers, we need to spend time in the Word of God. And that was what I think I was doing. By opening the Bible app and then reading and meditating. So that's what I was thinking. It's a daily habit. God was actually using that to position me. But I had no idea God was using it for that. So every day, like I was saying, I will consistently read and then engage with other people's verses that they share. What I saw was another discipline God saw to be positioning. That one message that I received from her became the beginning of a relationship that would transform my understanding of leadership, purpose, and an influence. That was the beginning, just one message. That message became the beginning of building something divine, and it changed my perspective about leadership, about purpose, and about influence. Now, every change goes through a process. And as you know, we are called Rewire. And so I also went through a rewiring process. So before I met my dear sister Carol here, I was extremely shy. How many of you here are shy, like myself? How many of us are shy? Oh, let me see. Wow. Wow. I was extremely shy. And as somebody will say, I was an introverted. As an introvert. So I'm sure many of you can relate. And possibly I was very timid. I was very timid. So if you are in the same state, then know that you are at the right place today. I never saw myself as a leader. I never saw myself as a leader. And many of us are in the same situation. I never saw myself as a leader. Why? Because to me, leadership was only for people with titles, with positions, with loud personalities, or public recognition. That was what I was thinking back then. So I never saw myself as one because I didn't have any position. I didn't have any title. Do you have a position? Do you have a title? But through my dear sister's, obedience, through her mentorship, her leadership coaching, and exposure to John Maxwell's teachings, my mindset began to change. It began to change. Then I encountered one statement, which I say very often, that transformed my life when it comes to the way I viewed leadership. Leadership is influence. Nothing more, nothing less. Leadership is influence. Nothing more, nothing less. Can we say it together? Once more. Thank you. That is it. Not title, not positions. And I believe many of us also grew up not admiring leadership because of what we see in our country, in the world. Because there is corruption, there is bribery, and a whole lot of negativity around people, in quotes, in leadership positions. That statement for me changed my thinking. I realized that leadership wasn't about titles. It is about influence. And every single person has influence. Every single person. Every single person has influence, including the quiet. How many of us here are quiet? The quiet ones, let me see your hand up. Good. Including the quiet. If you're a quiet person, you have influence. Including the person who says, I'm an introvert, you also have influence. Including the young, because that is how you see yourself. You are young. You also have influence. Including students, and I believe we are all students, so you have influence. And then lastly, including you. You have influence. So every single person has influence. Every single person. Now, there are people who ask, are leaders born or leaders are made? And I believe that could be very debatable. But if leaders are born, who here wasn't born? If leaders are born, who here wasn't born? We're all born. They gave birth to us. If leaders are born, then we are all leaders. But ultimately, leaders are made because you have to be intentional to become a good leader, to become a great leader. Every single one of us here has what we call influence. The next thing I want to talk about is the heartbeat behind Rewire Leadership Academy. The heartbeat behind what we do. And I can easily decide to answer it with one word and say it is God. But maybe you wouldn't understand why I'm saying it is God. So I would have to break it down a little bit for all of us. The heartbeat of this academy is transformation through the renewal of the mind. Transformation through the renewal of the mind. And that is why Romans 12 verse 2 is our popular quote. It's our popular quote. Your mind has to be renewed. Do not conform to the patterns of this world, but be transformed by the renewal of your mind. Without renewal of mind, there is no transformation. So your mind has to change. You can't say you want a new life with the old mindset you have. It's not possible. You need a new mindset for that new life you would want to live. Rewire exists because we believe young people are not too young to lead. As you sit here, as young as you are not too young to lead. And we believe that you are not too young to lead because you have influence. We also believe that leadership is learned. We can learn how to lead. You can learn how to lead. We all can. We also believe that influence can be used for God's glory. The influence you have, I have, we can use it for God's glory. Not for our fame, not for our popularity, but for God's glory. For God's glory. So what kind of influence do you have? Think about it. We also believe that transformation begins internally, within, before it becomes visible externally. It begins within you, within us. And that is solely the work of God through His Son, Jesus Christ. But we have to be ready to believe, to accept. That is why we exist. Rewire, can I also say, was born out of a burden, but not maybe a negative burden, because when we think of burden, we might think it is negative. But it was born out of a burden. That burden is to give young people like yourself the leadership foundation many of us never had. Many of us never had. That is the burden that led to it. That what some of us didn't get, we want you to have it. Not just leadership for success, but leadership that is rooted in faith, in character, in discipline, in purpose, in influence. That's the kind of influence or leadership that we want to have. That is rooted in faith, rooted in purpose, rooted in influence. And each one of us here have that ability to lead this way. It is all about raising faithful leaders. Because the world needs such leaders to be faithful. It's not going to be easy, but you can, and I can, and we can, if we believe. If we believe. Now the story continues, and then pay attention to the story. Now back then, when I was teaching here in Kent Baptist, we used to have a discipleship club, what we call DC. Maybe only few of you might remember, but we had a club like that. And that club was all about making disciples for Christ. Students like yourself belong to that class. Those who desire to learn more about God were part of that club. Part of the activities of the club, some of our students at once in a while have to be prepared for quiz competitions, to go for quiz. We had 3 of our students going for one of these quizzes, and I think they came, the first runner up or the second runner up. Because of their position, they were asked to go for a camp in Accra. That particular camp, Madam Baba is not here, but they went with Madam Baba. Those of us who know her, they went with her to the camp, and they had so many things learned. But when they came back, they were supposed to be taken through more of like a step-down training. They were given materials to be used for the training. The training had to be done. I was not supposed to do the training. Madam Baba was supposed to do it. But I was supposed to be there as part of the club to support her. But before this happened, I had already met my dear sister, and I've learned so much about leadership and about John Maxwell and what he believes about leadership. I saw the material that they were using, and I saw the content. Yes, I didn't go with them. I didn't know, but I saw what is in the book, and it's almost everything I've been learning all this while. But this is never a coincidence, because after I learned and my mind changed and I wanted to impact others, I didn't know how to start. I had the idea. How do I pour what I have learned to other young ones? I had no idea. But God used that moment. When I saw it that day, of course, I sat in, I contributed. Then I told her I would like to help. The next meeting, I was a facilitator. And that was the beginning of what we see today. God had been preparing me behind the scene, like I was saying. And the leadership class was born. When we began, it was not called Rewire Leadership Academy. It was just leadership class. We began with about 10 students, and what began with 10 students eventually became Rewire Leadership Academy. And that takes me to the next thing I want to talk about, the power of small beginnings. The power of small beginnings. Of being able to start small. Some of us, we are waiting to think we have so many things before we start something. But if you're waiting to have so many or so much before, you would never start. You would never start. You would never start. But there is so much power if you can begin small. Today we have a conference and then there are probably hundreds of you here. But we began with only 10 students. Thereabouts. When we started, we only had what we call 3 student books for 10 students. Because only 3 students went for the quiz. So when they came back, they had the student guidebook and then 1 teacher's guide. There were only 3, but now we had 10 students, but with 3 student guide. How do we share it? How do we manage? 10 students with 3 student guide. They had to be paired. Maybe 3 people on 1 seat with 1 student guide in front of them. Well, I could have said it was not enough. Let's wait when we have more than we would. But that was what we had at that time. We had no funding. When we began, we had no funding. No sponsorship. No resources. No guarantees. But we kept showing up. We kept showing up. And a big kudos to those students who were the foundation of this. I don't want to mention names because it will take so much time. Because they kept showing up. Not like today we meet, we get some water to drink, and sometimes we get some drinks. When we come dry, we all go home like that. No water, nothing like snacks. But they kept showing, they had a desire to show up, to come and learn. They even didn't understand most of the things we were learning, but they were curious enough to give it a go. They kept showing up. Rain or shine, they will show up. Eventually, God provided over 80 guidebooks. But the question is, how did it happen? That is the question. We began with 3 student guides. Now it turned into 80. One thing that I did, that when we met, after I decided to help, Madam Baba, I think now she's here. Oh, let's clap for her. She's at the back there. Let's clap for her. Thank you. Back then, she then became more of like our secretary in the group. When we meet, she would take summaries of the things that we've learned, maybe core points. Then mostly, I would take some pictures during our meeting, and I would just post them on Facebook, just to, in a way, create awareness and add value to other people. Later did I know that a mate of mine in senior high school saw one of the posts, saw the picture, and then he saw a picture of the student guidebook. Then he sent me a message. He said, Alfred, I had a training in my church, and we used the same material, the same guidebook. I have a box full of the student guidebooks in my room, doing nothing. If you like them, you can have them. I just have to meet him, pay for his transport, and then get a box full of 80 copies of student guide. If there is not God, I don't know who can make it happen. We had only 3. I had no idea what we are going to do. Because I was also thinking of how can we even continue to do more? Because the moment I began, I was in a way thinking ahead. How can we even have more people to benefit? But here we have only 3 student guide. But God turned the 3 into 80. Because we stood faithful and we used and we managed what we had. We didn't wait. We didn't wait. We used it and God multiplied it. I don't know what you have that God may have given to you. The only way it will multiply is when you begin to use it or use them. If you're waiting for more, it is not going to come. And you will never start. You won't. See, one major lesson that I learned from that phase is this, that God often provides more when we faithfully use what He had placed in our hands. God often provides more when we faithfully, not when we misuse, when we faithfully are able to use and then manage what He has already given unto us. Now to a more difficult moment, because along the line something happened. But the good news is that what happened did not stop the vision. How many of us know COVID-19? All right. We began along the line, there was COVID-19. Schools has to be closed down. Everything has to put a stop. Back then, some of us were actually sleeping in the school with some of the junior high 3 students, or GHS 3 students, preparing for BEC. But because of the COVID, schools were closed, so they had to go back to their homes. Everything shut down. I had to make a decision. Do I stop? Do I also give it a pause? Or we continue? But we pursued on. I had to stay here in the school, almost all by myself, for several months. And then these students will still show up. Of course, we're few, so at least we can follow the protocols, nose masks and all that. We kept meeting, and they kept showing up. Even in the face of the pandemic, they kept showing up. In that situation, it never stopped the vision. Not because it was convenient, but because the purpose demanded commitment. It wasn't convenient. Maybe I had a better bed in the house to sleep on, but I was here. So I stayed here with little to no money, in uncomfortable living conditions, simply because I believed in these young people that they matter. You matter. You are very important. And looking back today, I can say confidently that God sustained what He initiated. God sustained what He began. If God began it, He will sustain it. He will sustain it. He will. Well, because of my time, I'm going to wrap up. But in wrapping up, I'm going to just give you this charge, this final charge. And I want to listen to it very carefully. Never underestimate what God can do through consistency, obedience, and a willing heart. Never underestimate what God can do and is able to do through consistency, obedience, and a willing heart. A Bible app interaction became a movement. A shy introvert like myself became a leadership facilitator. 3 books became 80. A small classroom became Rewire Leadership Academy. And this is only the beginning. Please listen, I'm ending. Please listen, I'm ending. You, today, as you sit here, you may feel unnoticed. You may feel unnoticed that nobody has seen you or nobody sees you. You may feel unqualified. You may feel unprepared. But God specializes in using ordinary people to produce extraordinary impact. The next generation, which includes you and myself and all of us, does not need just talented people. The next generation needs faithful leaders. And that is why we are here, to raise a generation that is rewired for influence. Thank you.